Please raise your hand if you ever heard of the term gerrymandering. Okay. Not as much as I'd hoped, but we could work with that. Right, so before I get started with my speech, you need to know two key terms. First of all, what is a congressional district? A congressional district differs in different democracies. You've got a congressional district to elect a representative to the US House in the United States, which is essentially just the lower chamber of Congress. And, for example, in the UK, you've got a congressional district which goes by another name, which essentially just elects a representative to the House of Commons. But what is gerrymandering? What am I talking about, really, for the next 10 minutes? Gerrymandering is basically how political parties cheat in order to win elections. But how do they do this? Well, let's imagine a fake scenario. Behind me, you've got 6 districts that are split for 48 voters. Now you can see the blue party has a majority and therefore should get 4 out of the 6 seats. But let's say they want to gerrymander these 6 districts. What can they do? Well, for one, they could pack opposing voters into one district. Basically, they can pack red voters into one and minimize their power. Through this, they increase their power in an election and can pass more legislation. But they could also split. Splitting is essentially when political parties will split the opposing party's voters and minimize their power. It is high risk, high reward. You can see behind me the Blues have managed to win 6 districts and 0, but let's say there's a strong showing for the red district in a year, they could potentially win a few districts. Although, why would they do this? And how? Well, they can gerrymander in 2 ways, racially and in a partisan way. Partisan gerrymandering works when they minimize power of opposing parties. Basically, if an opposing party hasn't done well, you can basically just put that down to gerrymandering if they're expected to do well in a certain year. But what about racial gerrymandering? Racial gerrymandering works when a political party will try to minimize power of a racial minority. In the US, you can minimize power of Latino voters, Black voters, etc. But if you want to see this in action, you can look at North Carolina in 2011. Well, you can see behind me a bunch of squiggly lines. They don't really make any sense. Fair enough, you might not understand what they mean. But it makes more sense if you put this graph above it. Now, the darker the blue behind me, you can see the more percentage of Black people in a neighborhood. Now, you can see in some districts, there is a high proportion of Black voters in comparison to another. Now, you can put that down to packing, splitting, etc. But what was the impact? What happened? Well, in North Carolina in 2011, 50% of votes went to Republicans, as opposed to 48% to Democrats and 2% to others. Although, what did this look like when congressional districts were awarded? Democrats only won 3 seats to their supposed 6, and Republicans won 10 when they were meant to get 7. How is that fair? How is that democratic? How is that justice? Well, it's not. Now, you can also see this through specific districts. District 12, for one, is a district which was both partisan, which was both gerrymandered in a partisan and in a racial manner. Partisan gerrymandering, you can see this behind me. Essentially, you can see 4 pie charts. 3 of them symbolize election results in a specific district. You can see 75% of voters voted for Democrats in these districts. But when North Carolina average is slightly above 50% for Republicans and below 50% for Democrats, does that make sense? No, it doesn't. Well, you can also put this down to racial gerrymandering. As you can see behind me, minorities make up over 50% of the population in District 12. But how is that representative of North Carolina when it's a very homogenous society where over nearly 2/3 of the population is white? Well, it doesn't. But what did this result in? Well, it resulted in a reduce in black voter turnout in the state. You can basically see behind me that in the elections where there was a Republican gerrymander in North Carolina, black voters didn't participate. Let that sink in. Black voters didn't participate in elections. Now, essentially, how is that justice? How is that a democracy when an entire racial group just decides not to participate? Well, it's not democracy. But what are the key takeaways from this? Well, it tells us that, well, fairness might not be always the case. Well, fairness might not always be prevalent in politics. You might be asking yourself, why should I care? I am a 15-year-old who doesn't even live in a democracy. Why am I telling you about this? Well, it teaches important lessons that relate to all of us. It teaches us that what accounts us for cheating or lying or etc. Essentially, taking us back to kindergarten. Lying is bad, cheating is bad, but what's stopping us? Why do we not cheat 24/7? And that is up to you individually. If you can put yourself in any winning dilemma, then why don't you? Well, that's for you to decide. Why do you not do that? Thank you.